Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's Friday, February 7th, 2025, and we need to talk about what's unfolding across a massive stretch of central and eastern Canada right now. Environment Canada has issued a significant collection of yellow-level weather warnings, spanning from Ontario straight through to Quebec. And folks, this is the real deal. We're looking at a legitimate cold snap, combining with fresh snowfall that's already underway in several regions as I'm speaking to you. The warnings currently in effect cover an enormous geographic footprint, and depending on exactly where you're positioned within this zone, you're either experiencing these conditions right now or you're about to within the next several hours. Let me break down what Environment Canada is telling us through these official yellow warnings, because the devil is really in the details here. Starting with the cold aspect of this system, and this is where things get genuinely concerning from a safety standpoint. We're looking at wind chill values that are going to make it feel dramatically colder than the actual air temperature would suggest. Across much of southern and eastern Ontario, overnight wind chills have already dropped into the range of -25 to -30 degrees Celsius. And in some of the more exposed regions, particularly anywhere with elevation or limited tree cover, we've seen values approach -35. Now, when you're talking about wind chill in this territory, you're not just dealing with discomfort. You're dealing with a legitimate frostbite risk that can affect exposed skin in less than 10 minutes of outdoor exposure. Quebec is facing similar conditions, but with some regional variation that's worth understanding. The southern portions of the province, including areas around Montreal and extending eastward through the eastern townships, are under these same yellow cold warnings, with wind chills bottoming out between -25 and -32 degrees Celsius. The timing is crucial here, because we're looking at these extreme wind chill values persisting through the overnight hours tonight and into tomorrow morning, before we see any meaningful moderation. What makes this particularly challenging is that it's hitting on a Friday going into the weekend, which means people have travel plans, outdoor activities scheduled, sporting events for kids, all the things that characterize normal winter weekend life. And those plans need to be reconsidered through the lens of these dangerous cold conditions. But here's where this weather story gets more complex, because we're not just dealing with extreme cold. We're simultaneously managing active snowfall across portions of this warning zone. Fresh snow is coming down right now across sections of eastern Ontario and western Quebec, and the accumulations we're tracking are significant enough that Environment Canada has layered snow warnings on top of the cold warnings in several regions. We're looking at snowfall totals in the range of 10 to 15 centimetres in the hardest hit areas, with some localised bands potentially pushing toward 20 centimetres before this system moves through. The snow started in earnest during the overnight hours, and it's continuing through the morning commute as we speak. Which means if you're in one of these affected zones and you haven't looked outside yet, you need to do that now before you head out the door. The geographic distribution of this snowfall is creating some interesting challenges from a forecasting and impact standpoint. The heaviest snow bands are setting up across a corridor that extends from roughly the Ottawa region eastward into western Quebec, including areas around Gatineau and continuing into the Laurentians. This is classic lake effect enhancement combined with a broader weather system. And what that means practically is that snowfall rates and accumulations are going to vary significantly over relatively short distances. You could have one community seeing 8 centimetres, while a town 15 kilometres away gets buried under 18 centimetres. And that's just the nature of how these systems organise themselves when you've got the topographic and water body influences at play in this region. Road conditions have deteriorated significantly through the overnight period, and they're going to remain challenging throughout the day-to-day. The combination of fresh snow accumulation with these brutally cold temperatures means that road treatment is less effective than it would be in milder conditions. Salt doesn't work as well when temperatures drop below -15 or so, and we're way below that threshold across the warning zones. Transportation authorities are out in force with ploughs and treatment, but I'm seeing reports of reduced visibility, snow-covered highways, and significantly increased travel times across the impacted regions. If you absolutely must travel today, and I want to emphasize that if there's any way to delay non-essential travel, you should seriously consider doing that. You need to allow significantly more time than normal, Ensure your vehicle is properly winterized with good tires and a full emergency kit, and keep your gas tank above half full at all times. Let me give you the timeline for how this is going to evolve, because understanding when conditions improve is just as important as knowing when they're at their worst. The snowfall component of this system is going to taper off through the afternoon and into the early evening hours across most regions, with eastern areas hanging on to some lingering flurries into tonight. So by tomorrow morning, Saturday the 8th, we should be done with active precipitation across the entire warning zone. However, and this is a significant however, the cold is going to be much more persistent than the snow. Those dangerous wind chill values I mentioned earlier are going to maintain through tonight and into tomorrow morning, and we're not really going to see meaningful moderation until we get into Saturday afternoon and evening. Even then, we're not talking about a dramatic warm-up. We're talking about wind chills improving from the -25 to -35 range into the -15 to -25 range, which is still cold enough to warrant caution with outdoor exposure. The extended outlook beyond this weekend shows a gradual moderating trend, but I want to be clear that we're not returning to anything approaching mild conditions anytime soon. By early next week, we should see actual air temperatures climbing back toward the -10 to -5 range in southern regions, with wind chills becoming less of a factor as wind speeds decrease. But this is February in central and eastern Canada, and the baseline expectation should be winter conditions, rather than hoping for some dramatic thaw. What we're experiencing right now is a legitimate cold snap, a deviation below normal, but it's not an unprecedented or record-breaking event. It's the kind of winter weather that this region can and does experience, which is exactly why the warnings exist and why taking them seriously matters. I want to spend a moment on the safety protocols that Environment Canada is emphasising with these warnings, because this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of protecting yourself and your family. The primary concern with wind chill values in this range is frostbite risk, and it's not theoretical, it's a real danger that can develop quickly. Exposed skin can freeze in under 10 minutes when wind chills reach -30 or colder, and the early signs of frostbite can be subtle enough that you don't realise it's happening until damage has occurred. If you must be outside in these conditions, you need to cover all exposed skin, and that means proper winter gear. Insulated gloves or mittens, not those thin fashion gloves. A hat that covers your ears completely. A scarf or neck warmer that can pull up over your nose and mouth. And multiple layers on your core and legs. Your extremities lose heat the fastest, so particular attention to hands, feet, and face is critical. For anyone who works outdoors or whose job requires extended time outside in these conditions, employers have legal obligations under occupational health and safety regulations to provide appropriate warm-up breaks and monitor workers for signs of cold stress. If you're in that situation and you feel like proper precautions aren't being taken, that's not just uncomfortable, it's potentially a workplace safety violation that you have every right to address. The cold doesn't care about deadlines or productivity targets, and neither should your safety protocols. Let's talk about vulnerable populations for a moment, because extreme cold events like this one disproportionately affect certain groups. Anyone experiencing homelessness is at severe risk right now, and municipalities across the affected regions have activated cold weather protocols that open warming centres and increase outreach services. If you're aware of someone who's without adequate shelter in these conditions, contacting local outreach services or emergency services is entirely appropriate. Elderly individuals, particularly those living alone, are also at elevated risk, because physiological changes with aging can reduce the body's ability to sense and respond to cold. If you have elderly neighbours or relatives, this is an excellent time to check in, confirm their heating systems are working properly, and ensure they have adequate supplies if they're choosing to stay inside rather than venture out. Parents need to be making informed decisions about outdoor activities for children today and through the weekend. School outdoor recess policies typically have temperature and wind chill thresholds that trigger indoor recess, and most jurisdictions in these warning zones are going to be hitting those thresholds. For families with weekend sports or outdoor activities planned, This is genuinely a time to consider rescheduling rather than toughing it out. Children are more susceptible to cold injury than adults because of their higher surface area to body mass ratio. And what might be manageable discomfort for an adult can become dangerous for a child much more quickly. I know there's cultural pressure around not being soft about winter weather, but there's nothing soft about making smart decisions based on actual risk assessment. From a systems and infrastructure standpoint, these conditions put stress on a number of services that we typically take for granted. Electricity demand spikes during cold snaps as heating systems run continuously. And while the grid in Ontario and Quebec is generally robust, it's worth ensuring you have backup plans if power interruptions occur. That means knowing where your flashlights are, having some non-perishable food that doesn't require cooking, and if you have medical equipment that requires power, having your backup battery systems charged and ready. Water pipes in vulnerable areas, exterior walls, unheated spaces, anywhere that typically stays warm only because of ambient heat from the rest of your house, are at risk of freezing, and frozen pipes can lead to burst pipes when they thaw, creating expensive and disruptive damage. Letting taps drip slightly can help prevent freezing, particularly overnight when temperatures are at their coldest. Vehicle preparation is something I cannot emphasize enough if you're planning to drive in these conditions. Beyond the obvious, winter tires and scraped windows, you need to think about emergency scenarios. If you end up stranded or stuck, can you survive in your vehicle until help arrives? That means having blankets, extra warm clothing, high-energy snacks, water, not in quantities that are burdensome, but enough to get you through several hours. A fully charged mobile phone is essential, but understand that battery performance degrades significantly in extreme cold, so keep your phone warm against your body rather than leaving it on your dashboard. Jumper cables, or a portable battery pack for jump-starting, are valuable because cold temperatures reduce battery capacity and engines are harder to start. Looking at the bigger picture context for this event, cold snaps like what we're experiencing are a normal part of the winter pattern across central and eastern Canada. What makes this one notable enough for widespread warnings is the combination of intensity and geographic extent. When you've got dangerous wind chills stretching from Ontario through Quebec simultaneously, that's a large population base being impacted at once, and that warrants the heightened communication and safety emphasis. Climate conversations sometimes create confusion about whether we should still expect extreme cold events, and the answer is absolutely yes. Climate change is altering average conditions and seasonal patterns. But that doesn't mean extreme events in both directions don't occur. In fact, some research suggests that certain atmospheric patterns could lead to periodic extreme cold outbreaks even within an overall warming trend. The snowfall component of this event, while significant for travel impacts and immediate accumulation concerns, is actually fairly typical for early February in these regions. We're looking at seasonal snowfall accumulations that are within or slightly above normal across most of the warning zones. So this fresh snow is adding to what's already been a legitimate winter season, rather than arriving as the first significant snowfall of the season. That context matters because infrastructure and preparedness systems are already in winter mode. Snow removal equipment has been active for weeks or months. People have their winter routines established, and there's a collective muscle memory about dealing with these conditions that's already engaged. I want to address something that sometimes creates confusion with warning systems. Why yellow warnings rather than red? Environment Canada uses a tiered warning system where colours indicate severity and certainty combined. Yellow warnings indicate significant weather that could cause harm or disruption, but hasn't reached the threshold for the highest alert level, or there's some uncertainty about exact timing or location of peak impacts. Red warnings are reserved for dangerous or potentially life-threatening conditions with high confidence. The yellow designation for this event reflects that, while the cold and snow are genuinely significant, they're within the range of conditions that the infrastructure and population of these regions are equipped to handle with appropriate precautions. This isn't minimizing the risk. Frostbite is serious. Travel hazards are real. But it's calibrating the response to match the specific conditions we're facing. For anyone wondering about timing for outdoor activities this weekend, beyond just today, Saturday is going to remain quite cold, but the active snowfall threat will be behind us, so visibility and road conditions should improve, even though temperatures will still be well below freezing. Sunday starts to look somewhat better from a temperature standpoint, with a modest moderating trend beginning, but we're still talking about winter conditions requiring appropriate precautions. If you've got outdoor plans you're determined to proceed with, Sunday afternoon would be the best window within this weekend. But again, proper cold weather preparation isn't optional. The aviation sector has been dealing with these conditions through overnight operations and into this morning. And while major airports in Toronto, Ottawa and Montreal have snow removal operations that are quite efficient, there have been some delays and a handful of cancellations, primarily on smaller aircraft that are more sensitive to snowfall rates and visibility restrictions. If you have travel plans that involve flying today, checking your flight status before heading to the airport is essential. And building in extra time for ground transportation to the airport is wise given road conditions. One aspect of cold weather safety that doesn't get discussed enough is carbon monoxide risk. When it's extremely cold, people sometimes make dangerous decisions about supplemental heating, running vehicles in garages to warm up, or using equipment that's not designed for indoor use. Every winter, we see tragedies from carbon monoxide poisoning that are entirely preventable. And this cold snap increases those risks because people are desperate to stay warm. Your home heating system should be professionally maintained and have functional carbon monoxide detectors. That's non-negotiable. Never use generators, camp stoves, or charcoal grills indoors or in attached garages. If you're warming up your vehicle, make sure your exhaust pipe isn't blocked by snow. And don't warm up vehicles in enclosed spaces, even with the garage door open. It's not sufficient ventilation. As we wrap up this detailed breakdown of what's happening across Ontario and Quebec today and through the weekend, I want to emphasize that staying informed is an ongoing process during active weather events. Conditions can evolve, warnings can be updated or expanded, and local variations can create situations that differ from the regional forecast. Environment Canada's website and weather apps provide location-specific updates, and local media outlets are tracking conditions in their coverage areas. This script gives you the comprehensive overview you need to understand the situation. But if you're in the warning zones, checking for updates periodically. Today and tomorrow is good practice. The fundamental message here is one of informed caution rather than panic. These are serious winter conditions that warrant respect and appropriate precautions. But they're conditions that this region experiences and manages. Take the warnings seriously. Make smart decisions about travel and outdoor exposure. Check on vulnerable individuals in your life. And prioritize safety over convenience when those considerations conflict. We've got the snow moving through today, with bitter cold persisting into Saturday morning, before gradual improvement begins. And by understanding that timeline, you can plan accordingly. I'll be continuing to monitor these conditions and will provide updates as warranted if anything significant changes with the forecast or if new warnings are issued. For now, stay safe out there, stay warm, and make good decisions based on the actual conditions you're facing, rather than what you wish they were. If you found this detailed breakdown helpful for understanding what's happening with this cold snap and snowfall event, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future weather updates. And drop a comment letting me know what region you're dealing with these conditions from. I always appreciate hearing from viewers across the coverage area. Bundle up, take care of each other, and we'll get through this cold snap together. Stay safe, everyone.